In the northeastern area of Canada and the United States, people settled along the Atlantic coast and the Great Lakes region. That area was home to about 30 or so tribes known as the Eastern Woodland Indians. The area was rich in food and natural resources or natural materials. Oak, birch, pine, and maple trees provided wood for their tools and homes. Many tribes lived in long buildings made from wooden poles and elm tree bark. They were called longhouses. The houses were so big that more than 20 people could live in one longhouse. Some tribes lived in birch bark wigwams. Wigwams were made from bent birch saplings that were covered with bark. Some tribes built dome roof houses of grass and tree bark. Many tribes carved the tree wood into bowls, tools, and utensils. Some made bark or grass baskets for gathering and storage. And they made excellent quality birch wood canoes. They paddled through the waterways to fish, and they gathered nuts and wild berries from the woods. Oh, and they ate maple syrup too. Do you know where maple syrup comes from?
Yeah, maple trees are tapped and then the sap comes out. So what else did they eat?
They grew crops of tobacco, squash, corn, and beans. People that lived near the lakes collected wild rice. They knew which plants or plant roots would be especially delicious or safe to eat. You know not to eat wild plants, right? You two don't have the knowledge that the Eastern Woodland people had.
Don't worry, we won't. Did they hunt?
They used traps to catch bear, beaver, and mink. They used bows, arrows, and spears to hunt ducks and bear. They didn't have ovens like we do today, so they cooked their food over an open fire. Sometimes they placed rocks and stones inside the fire until they were very hot. Then the rocks were placed into a container of water. That was one way to cook food.
So how did they travel?
They used the canoes I mentioned, and for land travel over deep snow, they used snowshoes. The shoes were made with wooden frames and strips of leather. Mostly, they traveled by foot. Moccasins were the most common footwear. Moccasins are like a slipper made of animal skin. They used animal skins to make their blankets and clothing. Some sewed porcupine quills and beads into their clothing. Beads made from shells were called wampum. Strings of wampum were used as money and also as a way to record history. The beads were used as symbols, woven into belts, and could be read like a story. In most Native American groups, women and girls gathered the food, cooked, and sewed. Some farmed the land. Typically, men and boys made the weapons and tools, hunted, and farmed. There were common beliefs among the Native Americans. They believed that the trees, clouds, rivers, well, just about everything has spirits that live in them. The Native people respected and loved the land, plants, and animals, as well as the sun, wind, and rain. They always took just what they needed from the earth and no more, so that there was a very healthy balance. The first people respected nature.
I love nature too. If I were an Eastern Woodlands Indian, I'd plant corn, squash, and beans. I'd hunt with bows and arrows, or fish from birch bark canoes. I'd even live in a longhouse or a wigwam. I guess I'd wear animal fur or deerskin, or maybe even a wampum belt. Yeah, I could see that.
Maybe Megan can pretend to be a Plains Indian, and you can trade goods with her.
Plains Indian? What's that?